It can happen randomly on a Sunday or on a Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't matter. It's not Disaster Tuesday, just a regular Tuesday. Except there's a bill that you weren't expecting today, a car repair, medical bill, something broke, and now you're sitting there doing math a million different ways. None of it's working. You can't put it on the credit card because it's maxed out. You can't move money from savings because there's not enough in there. You don't know who to ask. You could just try to wait and see, but those types of situations don't ever resolve themselves. That's what it feels like to not have an emergency fund. That is the anxiety that you feel when you can't solve the problem. I'm Andrea Oliver. This is the Ready Society. Practical resilience, no glitter. And today we're going to talk about the only money that can buy time. I know it sounds a little weird to put it that way because we're talking about emergency funds, but I promise you I'm going to bring it around. But you got to know this first. When we say emergency fund, we are not talking about any kind of an expense that you know is coming. Car registrations, annual insurance premiums, holiday spending, back to school stuff. That is not emergency money unless you have failed to plan for them. I would say, it could become an emergency, but they're not an emergency or justification for spending an emergency fund on their own. They need to have their own savings account or something that is not the emergency fund, because emergency funds, the situation's a little bit more detrimental. When you raid your emergency fund for things that you could have predicted or planned for, and then you have nothing left, the actual emergency will show up. I promise you that. As soon as you waste that money on something that it shouldn't have covered, you're going to have the actual emergency. And then you're back to your Tuesday math problem that you can't solve of how in the world do I pay for something that I don't have money for? I guess really I should say something relatable here, but I mean, it should all be relatable because I suck at this too. And I'm not just talking to you guys, I'm talking to me. I can't tell you how many times I've been caught off guard by expenses and I didn't have options, especially when I was raising my kids. I didn't have the luxury of having credit. I screwed that up early, so no credit cards. Between the ages of 22 and 30, my bank account was called the first bank of mom and dad. And that's the worst place you can be when your own parents cringe when you call, because they know they're about to have to pay for some disaster that you could have prevented if you would have prepared. And I'm not talking about the random $20 for gas or whatever, because I think everybody knows somebody in their life who perpetually needs gas money, and that's not what I'm talking about. That's not a big deal. It's more like they're giving you their own car payment to keep your lights on, because let's face it, the people that you ask for money who are actually willing to give it to you almost never are the ones who have it to give. They come up with it, which is what you should have done in the first place. So let's talk about your emergency fund and what it needs to cover in reality. It exists really for only 3 reasons: job loss, or income loss, I should say, like if whatever your significant income disruption is, unexpected major medical events, and I'm not talking about copays, but an actual event that creates a financial pressure. And sometimes that is somebody's in the hospital and you need that gas money, or you need food to eat while you're in the hospital. Those things are actual emergencies because you can't not pay for those types of things. Major unexpected repair, your washer and dryer went out or something like that. And usually those things are they're significant enough that you cringe and you want to cry when you hear how much it's going to cost. Because anytime that you're dealing with a repair, you're dealing with a skilled trade, and that's where money's at. And that's a whole different discussion that we'll probably have in another episode. But for right now, that's what you just need to know, is that those 3 categories of things are where you need to have your emergency fund allotted toward. The scenarios where without an emergency fund, you're going to end up having to borrow at a high interest rate, things like that. Like, we don't want you making decisions that you're going to end up regretting. And that's what this whole thing is about, is we want to try to build you some time and options, because when the credit card that you maxed out during a rough patch 3 years ago, if you're still paying on that, like $200 a month interest from all that time ago, or, you've had to sell a family heirloom, or the wedding rings that you had to pawn, those are all the downstream consequences of not having the buffer when it was needed. And almost everybody has been there. I don't know how many times we've looked at the 401k and said, hey, should we do it? The answer is almost always, no, you shouldn't, but sometimes there's not a choice. It's the entire idea that you guys don't fully realize that having a high interest savings account, and I'll give you a few examples later on of actual banks that are really good right now that you should put your money in. But the entire idea is you put the money in a bank, give it, the high yield, but it's going to earn you a little bit of money, but not enough. So some people think that they can just stick however much money in those savings accounts and then leave it and let it grow on its own. And that is a bad idea. They do not grow enough, because even a high yield savings account, let's say 5% interest on like $5,000, it's only going to grow $250 a year. So it's good to have those as, a little bit of buffer money, but they are definitely not to be used to grow themselves into your emergency fund. You will not have money when you need it. The value of it is that it's going to buy you time and options. When you have an emergency fund and something goes wrong, you get time to think. You can assess the situation, research your options, and make decisions that are right for your actual circumstances rather than the first option. Because when the first option is the only option, it's almost always a bad decision. When you don't have time or options and something goes wrong, every single decision that is made under maximum pressure with minimum choices produces the worst possible outcome, to put it like Poindexter. So all you Poindexters out there, I can be smart too. I'm not just pretty. A 1-month emergency fund is not life-changing financial security. It's just a month of time. And often that month of time is enough time to solve the problem without it becoming a crisis. In fact, almost all crisis situations or problems can be solved within 30 days. If you have, I would dare say, if you had $1,000 in 30 days, you can solve any problem in your life, almost. Like, we're going to say 80 to 90% of your problems. But what we need you to do is get this started right away. Separate your emergency money from your checking account. That is literally not negotiable, because when the emergency fund's in the same account as your grocery money, it doesn't really exist. You're going to end up having an emergency and you ate your emergency money in groceries. It's going to normalize that money being in there, and then you'll normalize it as just additional spending, and you're not going to have it. This is what happens to basically 100% of emergency funds if you keep them in the same count as regular spending. I don't know of anybody that has ever worked out for. Open your separate savings account. Name it emergency fund. Get clever or something. But don't touch it. Like, there's got to be a buffer between you and that money. Something has got, like, you have to wait for the bank to open. You have to actually drive there. You put time and space between you and that money so that you can't just click a button on your phone and scoot it over to wherever you want. There needs to be friction. If you can access it too easy, you don't have enough friction. So there you go. Changes that you make right now, they're going to compound long term. So, like, just getting it started, put it in, a high yield savings account, 4 or 5%. So there's right now the best ones, it looks like, is Marcus, Ally,Ally, and SoFi, SoFi. Those are the ones right now that are paying the most, that are the best ones if you don't have a credit union. But they do have the best rates right now. They're very competitive. So your money's going to at least do something while it just sits there and waits for you to need it. But again, that's not the point. The point is you need the time that it's going to buy you when you need it. So this is what my dumbass did once. I had, this is an embarrassing story. I had 12 envelopes and they were all labeled and they all had cash inside. There was $5,000 or $6,000 in cash inside all of these different envelopes. It was every penny I owned, plus every debit card I owned, all of my IDs, my birth certificate. We are talking insurance cards, everything. The whole nine of everything I owned was inside of a wallet that contained 12 different envelopes that were labeled, of what bill they were supposed to pay, what the saving, what I was saving for. And I'll tell you what, when you have anxiety issues like I did, it'll have you doing weird things. And that's partially why I have this podcast, is because I want to help people reduce that panic and anxiety by just being prepared and not just prepped. Because while everybody else is freaking out, you're going to be good. But I digress. Let's talk about this. So what happened was I was driving down the road and anxiety hit me, and I don't know why, but I picked that wallet up and I threw it out the window while I was driving down the road. I don't know why I did it, and I didn't know that I did it until later that day. I was like, where's my money? Where's my stuff? And I couldn't remember. I remembered throwing it out the window, but I couldn't remember where I was. And luckily, a local cop happened to see it in the road, and he called me the next morning and said, hey, I have your wallet, and do you know that it's a bad idea to have all of your money in envelopes in it? He said, I cannot believe this is literally your entire life. And if Stan Holt had not told me, hey, move this stuff around, this is really stupid, it's a very bad idea. Thank God he was a good man and he brought that all back to me. But if anybody else would have found that, I would have been in a lot of trouble. And that is where I learned to stop sticking every single thing in my wallet. As a matter of fact, to this day, I don't even carry a wallet anymore, so that can never happen again. I don't carry a purse. I don't carry a wallet. So anyway, I've digressed for the second time getting off the subject, but all I'm saying is don't put the money in envelopes, in cash, in wallets and stuff. You've got to get it into an account somewhere. But we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about why you've probably tried to do this before and it didn't work. And it's because you've been told that you have to save 3 to 6 months of living expenses in your emergency fund. And the advice, really, it's correct. And for most households, 3 to 6 months of living expenses, that's a good target. And it would provide a meaningful protection against all the emergencies that you could possibly have. Because, even job loss, it'll take 3 to 6 months to resolve. I get that. But it's also advice that causes most people to do nothing at all, because it sounds paralyzing. It sounds like there's no way I can do that. That's just not something I can do. Because when you do that math, you see 3 to 6 months of expenses is like $12 to $15 or $20,000. And then you're just like, okay, yep, never mind. It's too much. And you don't start at all. And that's not the right takeaway. It's just the correct advice. So the first real milestone that you need to get to is $1,000. The most impactful single emergency fund milestone isn't 3 months of expenses. It's just $1,000. And here's why. Because 80% of household emergencies, like actual emergencies, not predictable or irregular expenses that we've already talked about, but actual emergencies can be handled with $1,000 or less, almost all of them. Whether it's a car repair, medical copay, prescription, some kind of a plumbing emergency, broken appliances. They're actual events that send most people to the credit card with 20% interest for the next 3 to 5 years. So those need to be the ones that you're paying them off in cash with your emergency fund. $1,000 doesn't protect you from job loss, of course not, but it protects you from the constant financial bleeding that comes from having no buffer at all. It handles most of the actual emergencies that happen, And it's a number that's achievable for most households within about 90 days of good focused effort. So once you have that $1,000, then you can start going to, okay, let's save up more. Let's try to get to a month of expenses and then 3 months. And, but that sequence does matter. You got to get the 1,000 first. Then you go to 1 month. Don't just think that you're just going to try to pile a bunch of money in a savings account and try to get there as fast as possible, because you're going to set yourself up for failure. So $1,000, that's your first milestone. We really, really need you to get that, because like I said, $1,000 in 30 days will solve almost every single problem that you have. The question that I get most is people want to know, like, should they pay off that debt, like the credit card debt, or build the emergency fund? Like, should, if you're trying to hurry up and pay down high interest credit cards and stuff like that, you've got to get the emergency fund first. Put that on hold until you have the emergency fund, because if you're paying down your credit card before you start your emergency fund, then as soon as you have an emergency, and I promise you you're going to, it'll have to go back on the credit card, and then you're just chasing your own tail. So, build the $1,000 emergency fund, even if you do have high interest debt, then attack the debt aggressively. That's the logic. If you have no emergency fund, you do not want to be paying down debt until you do. So, $1,000, it's small enough that saving it does not slow your debt payoff or anything like that. Progress isn't going to get wiped out if something happens. Once you have all your high interest debt gone, though, then you need to be working on that full emergency fund of, your 3 to 6 months. But until you at least have $1,000, I would not touch trying to pay off credit cards and stuff. So this week, sometime, open your account, put in $25. You don't need to put in the whole 1,000. Just start it with $25. Go to your bank's website, right now, open the savings, transfer the money over. It would take you 15, 20 minutes, maybe, if even that. I've opened accounts in 5 minutes before. So get it in there, make it exist, turn this into a reality so that you've got time. You will literally be buying yourself time. So that is the emergency fund talk that we needed to have, taught you how to purchase time and options. You know now what it's for and what you need to have. So if you want to learn more, get my free book, Andrea-Oliver.com/No One's Coming. Go grab it, because it covers everything that we talk about on this show in one place. And if you want a monthly intelligence brief, plus all the tools that you need to implement the stuff that we learn and talk about in here, you can get the full Ready Society resource library and the membership. It is $7 a month. That's Andrea-Oliver.com/join. And I will see you next time.